for a number of years. It's actually coming up for 33. So I started my career as a programmer back in 1984, so when COBOL was quite big. Programming is not something I massively enjoy. I don't have the patience for it, so I quickly got out and moved into pre-sales, consultancy, project management, post-sales support, training, and that's where the majority of my career has been spent. So I worked for other companies for the first 15 years, worked for big corporates, I worked for BTR Industries, ran their internal IT departments, worked for IT companies, for software vendors, and then I had my first child in 2000, and at the time I lived in Tamworth, which I still do, but I worked in Reading. So my commute to the office was 124 miles. So I used to work at home on a Monday, go down very early on a Tuesday morning, come back very late on a Thursday night, and work at home on a Friday. But when you have a child, you can't do that anymore because you need some sleep at some time, and babies don't tend to afford you an awful lot of sleep at the best of times. So I made the decision then that I was going to set up my own business. So that was 17 years ago when I set Maximity up. And we have provided a lot of training to local and national companies. And in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, I've got very heavily involved with, as Julian said, CompTIA, on their membership side. So we are premier members of CompTIA, my organisation, and we sit on their education faculty. Now that puts me in quite a unique position because a lot of the training that we do is end-user based. So we're working with companies to put systems in, to run projects, to do long-term training on applications like Microsoft Office. But then the other side of it, the work that I do with CompTIA, takes me in front of vendors and distributors. So I see the IT channel. So I do training for Apple, for Kaspersky, for Ricoh, for Xerox. I do it all across Europe. A couple of weeks ago I was in Las Vegas doing some training for a company called Continuum, if you've come across organisations like that. So we sit in quite a unique position to look at the channel, the pure IT channel, but also the end user channel. And it's interesting to see people's take on technology and what does work, what doesn't work, and what people's challenges actually are. So data management for me is a really interesting topic because I started off as a programmer. So you know, when you're a programmer, you are designing databases, you're writing them from scratch, you've got to get people to use them. And then you end up, obviously, with all of the issues that sit around governance and making sure that people actually put the right data into the right fields at the right time for the right reason. And then you see people, when they grow their databases, and they'll go off on a tangent, and you'll get somebody within a department who doesn't quite like what's being developed, so they'll go off and they'll develop their own little database. And in actual fact, when I worked for one automotive company, it was a great deal of fun when we came to do stock takes. So because I was head of department, all of the department heads had to take part in stock takes. So we were at work at 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning, outside, counting steel wheels and pallets and bits of metal. And the finance department would never let us go home until they'd reconciled the 3 stock management systems that we had. So there was a stock management system that the production department kept, there was one that finance kept, and there was one that production planning kept. And they were never in sync with each other, surprisingly, because they didn't have the same data input. And that used to drive me nuts because, you know, you've got one set of stock in a company, so you just need one system that manages that stock and does it properly. But big companies sometimes don't get that, do they? They insist on having a main system, an ERP system that runs their organisation, but then people don't like bits of it, so they go off and they do their own little thing, and they're allowed to get away with it. So immediately you're introducing the opportunity for errors in your data management, because then somebody will come to a management meeting and they'll say, well, this is what our stock holding is, and then the finance department will say, no, it's not, it's this. But then you've got ambiguity. So who's right, who's wrong? And an inordinate amount of time is spent reconciling those systems to get them to match. It becomes a waste of time, doesn't it? So why aren't people interested in making sure that their data is centrally held and it's correct and it's up to date. So every company has data. They can't survive without that data, in whatever form it happens to be. But do they value it? So every company has a requirement to manage their data, to make sure that the quality of that data is correct, to make sure that their systems integrate, and to make sure that people use the systems in the right way at the right time for the right reason. But they don't, do they? So have you ever come across, in your organisation, a situation where people are using the data systems that they have absolutely 100% correctly? Has anybody ever come across that? No. But isn't that a sad state of affairs that they don't do that? And do they listen to us? No. When I worked, I had two roles in the automotive industry. And in one company I worked at, they were really good because they valued IT. So we had our own internal IT department, we wrote our own ERP system, we wrote our own MRP. And that was fantastic because it was high up on the priority list of the management team, the senior directors. The other company I worked for, it really wasn't. It was a token gesture. And when you've got a situation like that, you end up with finance ruling what happens with technology, where finance doesn't always understand what's involved in technology, so they won't spend money. Now, in one of the companies, my capital expenditure budget was £8 million a year. Do you think I could get hold of that £8 million to actually spend it? Because I reported into the Chief Financial Officer. And as fast as I came up with all my reports in the right format to justify expenditure, he'd go, no, I'm not going to spend it. So where does that leave an organisation? It leaves it grossly underinvested in, and therefore in this day and age, at significant risk of hacking, of all sorts of different things like that. So I do find it really interesting. One of the problems I think we have is that people see IT as a black art. You hear the term IT, people immediately in their heads, when they're outside of our industry, they think, oh, I don't understand that. You know, that's scary stuff, that IT thing. And then we talk about things like analytics, big data, the Internet of Things, data science, SaaS applications, cloud. And they think, well, I don't understand any of that. It's not relevant to me. Where's the connection between what I do in my job and that bit of technology that everybody says is so clever? And so part of the problem is the way that we portray what we do. Part of the problem, I think, that sits behind that is that often what we do, what you do, is very technical. So by its nature, it's really hard sometimes to take a very technical person in a technical job, get them to step far enough back to be able to see how to put across in business terms, in ordinary lay terms, what it is that you do. And it's really hard. It used to frustrate the living daylights out of me that people just didn't see the need to invest correctly in technology. When you see it, it's really frustrating, isn't it? Because you think, well, why don't you see the need to spend that 10 grand, 20 grand, £1,000, £500? Why don't you see the need to do it? Because you're opening up your business to risk if you don't. And I think the time has come now where we really have to be very, very clear in the way that we communicate with business to get their attention. There's a lot of noise out there. And some of that is about cutting through the jargon. So when you take it back to its core, every business has to manage its accounts. It has to pay its staff. It will have customers, it will have suppliers, it will have a set of prospects. It will have people it networks with. It'll have products or services or both. A lot of companies, irrespective of size, the three things they're interested in is what does that data tell them about how well they run their business. So they're interested in reporting, they're interested in analysis, they're interested in insights. And sometimes it's a case of putting aside what we do technically and putting our case forward in terms of the things that that business person, that department head is expecting to hear about. It's their pain points, what's causing them an issue. And usually what they want is answers from data. They want the data turned into information. They want that information so that they can make decisions that affect their budgets, that affect the running of that business, their staffing levels, or their resources. So it's quite hard though, isn't it, to change from what you do technically to putting it into business terms. And I think it's created a divide between technical people and between business people. They think we don't understand them, and vice versa. In fact, one of the jobs I had when I worked at Dunlop, the managing director of the company at the time, he knew nothing about IT, but he knew nothing about it. And when he interviewed me, he wasn't at all interested in what my technical capabilities were, because he just didn't understand them. So I tried asking him a couple of questions, and he threw a report across the table at me, and he said, "Yeah, just read that." But what he was interested in was what my knowledge of his business was. So he asked me what an FMEA is. Now that's a failure mode and effect analysis, and it's used to determine stresses in product manufacture and to see where there's risk in building different products. And I knew that because I'd written an FMEA system at a previous company. So I only got that job, I think, probably because I could demonstrate to him as a business person that I understood a bit about business, not just about IT. So one of the things he set me to do was, when I got my feet under the table running the IT department, he made me run production planning. Now I've got no experience at this point of running production planning at all. I was working for a company that made 6.5 million steel wheels a year. So we ordered an awful lot of steel, and we supplied all the major car manufacturers with the exception of Ford, because they make their own wheels. So we had a lot of stock. We had this big old factory. It's actually in Coventry, it's on Swallow Lane, where Swallow Sidecars first started up, who were the forerunner to Jaguar. And we had big presses, big welding machines. We had an electrophoretic paint plant, and we had a lot of welding equipment. So he dropped me from a great height, as I was only 26 at the time. I was the first female manager on the management team and the youngest by quite a long chalk. And he put me in charge of production planning. So he really did drop me from a great height to see whether I'd bounce or whether I'd, just sink under the surface. But that was really interesting because it made me step outside of my role running the IT department to really understand the business from the inside out. And at the time, the way that we planned production of wheels was by hand. So the guy who'd done it for all of his life, all of his working life, had these massive ledger books. And that's how he planned production of 6.5 million wheels a year. We had 67 different types of wheel that we made. So that's different tooling, different types of steel, different sizes, different rims, and different paints, all sorts of differences in there. And I computerised the whole lot of that for them. Because to me, there was no way I was going in there to spend all the hours under the sun just writing it out by hand. That made no sense to me whatsoever. But what it did do is it gave me a huge understanding of the issues that sat around that business. Nothing to do with IT, but what were the logistical problems of trying to get steel over from France when they shut down for August, and from other countries, where they've got to send it in by boat, and then the boat gets stuck and they won't let it through customs and things like that. So you start to understand the business itself. And that really changed my perception of where IT fits within an organisation, because it is a marriage. And we have a tool set, being technology people, that the rest of the business does not have, doesn't understand, but really, really needs. So one of the things that we can do is go out into that business and try and understand their side of it. Because if we're writing databases, if we're managing databases, if we're managing data, if we're producing reports and insights and analytics, we need to understand what they're going to be used for. Otherwise we can't do it absolutely perfectly. And another instance I've had very recently with an organisation I work with, they've discovered that for 2.5 years, they've been misaccounting for some of their sales because the data that they've been given by their supplier is inherently wrong. And what happened when the data started to go wrong and be misreported was that the guy in the accounting function didn't realise it was a mistake. He thought, oh, well, there's too much here, so I'll smooth it out over there. So he spent 2.5 years smoothing data out to make it look right because he didn't understand what that data actually meant and how it should have been reported. No idea about ratios, no idea about how to read that data. So it's very easy for us to just look at data in its own way and think that's the be-all and end-all. But data in any company has a purpose, and if we don't understand that purpose, we could miss opportunities. But equally, if we do understand that data, it gives us a massive opportunity to be able to help the business move forward. Because then we can suggest new ways of working. We can suggest where they're going to get new sales from, how they can run their production better, how they can buy more effectively, all the things that are important to the business to actually manage. So it's trying to turn that jargon on its head and turn it into something that business people will latch onto that makes sense to them. So just up on there, I thought it was really interesting. My systems manage my data. I don't know how often you come across this, but we deal with a lot of end user companies. Some are small, some are big. They think that buying a package is the be-all and end-all to managing their data. So they'll buy an off-the-shelf CRM package and think that's it, we've got our prospects covered. We know exactly what we're going to do, how we're going to market to them, how we're going to manage that data, and the system's going to do it for us. And they abdicate responsibility for the quality of that data because the system is going to do it for them. And no system ever does it? Systems are run by people. We put the data into them, so if we put the incorrect data in, it's going to come out wrong. It goes back to always garbage in, garbage out, always. And if you get 2 or 3 different people who are using that same system, and they've not been trained properly, because why should we train them? It's intuitive, they can learn it, they can go and Google how to use it. You'll get 3 different styles of data input. How many times have you come across databases where you've had to run them through a conversion routine to standardise the layout of them? So you get some people who put everything in capitals, some people who put everything in lowercase, some people who actually bother to put the capitals in the right places. And then you've had to amalgamate all that data and make it look professional. It's a waste of time, isn't it? Because if they did it right the first time, you wouldn't have to go through those conversion exercises to clear the data up. That's why I think GDPR will be really interesting. But there's more on that later. So, a lot of people will buy off-the-shelf systems. A lot of small companies will come across things like Microsoft Access. So who's come across people who've built Access databases? Yes. And how many of those Access databases are any good? Oh, that's okay. That's fine. If you've written them because you've got that technology background, that's all right, isn't it? It's where you come across somebody who's written a database and they're in the marketing department, or they're in purchasing, or they're in quality, and they've written themselves a little database to manage their data. But they don't understand all the technicalities that sit behind it, do they? They don't understand fields, field types. They don't understand relational databases. They don't understand data integrity. So what they build is something that kind of works, but doesn't really. And it's just a short-term stopgap. That person leaves, somebody else comes in to replace them. They have no idea how the database has been written, but they carry on using it. But the knowledge of it's gone. Nobody's documented it because nobody thought to, because they didn't think from a technology point of view about anything to do with the design of it, the quality of it, the governance of it, and the rest of it. So, I think actually Access should be banned from people who are not technology people, by and large, because they don't understand the technical side of it. I hate it when people say, can you write me an Access database? No, not going there. And then who really understands data? So when it comes to parameters on how data goes in, and CRM, I know I've mentioned it before, but it is one of those areas, isn't it? People go mad with CRM systems. And they think, oh, we can now just measure and monitor everything that moves within our organisation. But the problem with that is that you forget there's an end user sitting at the end of every computer. And that end user, in CRM terms, is often a salesperson. Salespeople inherently don't like reporting what they're doing. They like to bring in a sale at the end of the day, but they don't like saying, well, I've been to see this company, and then I've been to see that company, and then I went down and I had lunch, and I saw this one, and I took them out with me. They don't like doing that. Their psyche is not like that at all. And sometimes companies set parameters on data input that is just infeasible because they don't understand the nature of the people that they're dealing with or the departments that they're trying to get to use that technology. Cloud is making it a little bit easier on some of those fronts because it's giving people freedom. So it's allowing us to develop applications that are quick to use, that are easy for people to operate from their smartphone or from a tablet, and they can do it from anywhere that they happen to be. So that's helping a little bit in terms of making sure that data is more accurate and more up to date. But it's understanding the people behind the usage, I think, that's key there. Then who gets the headache of sorting it out when it all goes wrong? We do, don't we? Because they can't sort it out, because they don't have the technical knowledge to sort it out. So they'll set a process in motion to have a project, to do something that collects and gathers data, but they don't involve us at the outset. We just get the horrible bit at the end when it's all gone wrong. Then it's our fault because we weren't involved with it, and our fault because it's too difficult. So we have to do something to change the way that people view the outset of projects. They need to involve us, even from a concept perspective, never mind at the point at which they've decided a project should go live. But it's trying to get their attention, and that, I think, is one of the hardest things. So, who actually understands what data management is? We do, but the business often doesn't. And that is the crux of the problem. They don't understand what data management is because they've never had to do anything around that. Data, by and large, has been controlled by systems. So they might put SAP in, or BARM, or something like that, a big ERP system. And it will have consumed an awful lot of budget, an awful lot of resource, an awful lot of time to put something in that they think is now the panacea. But systems aren't. Systems are only part of a solution. They're part of a transformation. And the trouble is that people don't know what they don't know. And I know that sounds a really silly thing to say, but they just don't. They've not had that technical upbringing. They've not had that education that talks to them about data management, data design, governance, auditing. They've never been exposed to our side of technology. And so they don't know what it means. They can't visualise it. What we do, it's not a product, you can't plonk it in front of somebody. So it becomes very nefarious. And if you get IT departments where they're away from the rest of the business, people think more so then that there's a big divide. When I worked at Dunlop, one of the first things I did was take the lock off the computer room, the staff door, not off the actual computer room itself, because I didn't want them in there. But I took it off the staff door to make people accessible. And it was really frightening for my team because they'd never been exposed to the business. So I used to make them go out and walk around the shop floor, walk around the departments, actually talk to people to see if they got any problems, because the perception was IT doesn't support the business. You know, where's its value? It consumes all this money, all this budget, but we don't get any value as a business. Whereas actually there was a huge amount of value because we kept those systems operational 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We gave them all of the platforms to be able to run their manufacturing from, to report on sales, to process sales and purchase orders. There was a lot of value, but they didn't see it because of this perception problem. IT never come out. We never see them. They don't talk our language. So by getting people out into the business and integrating them, it made a huge difference to how people viewed us, and they became a lot more friendly and a lot more supportive of some of the initiatives that we had on the go and reasons why we wanted to spend money. Another problem, everybody's so busy, aren't they? Trying to get in to see somebody in a senior position is really hard. Trying to get in front of those decision makers because they're busy. They've got a lot of decisions to make, a lot of things to do. We know we can actually save them some time, often, but we can't get in to see them to tell them how to change, how we're going to save them some time. So trying to get heard above all that noise that goes on a day-to-day basis. And email adds to that noise. Email is the bane of most people's lives these days. Have you come across an application called Slack? Slack is fantastic. I love Slack. Their mission is to eradicate email. That's what their mission in life is to get rid of email. But I like Slack because it cuts through that noise. So, I can go onto my email system, and no matter what time of day or night, because I'm part of CompTIA global organisation, so a lot of emails come through overnight, anytime I go on, there's a whole raft of emails. And you get some rubbish ones, and you get some advertising ones, then you get the unsolicited, hi, we sent you an email last week about our products and services, are you going to buy them? It's like, no. But we get such a lot of email noise, it gets really hard to distinguish what's important from what's not important, what's urgent from what's not urgent. So applications like Slack really help because they're between you and somebody you expect to have a conversation with, and it's instant. So I have the app on my iPhone, I have it on my iPad, I have it on my desktop. It works like a standard app, so you get a little red badge that tells you how many unread messages you've got. So you know if there's an unread message there, and you can go in at your leisure and look at those. But it's between you and somebody else. So it's point-to-point conversation. And that makes it so much easier to manage communication within a corporate environment, because it's the people that you need to have those conversations with. And it cuts out the need to have all the protocol of hi so-and-so or dear so-and-so and kind regards and all the rest of it at the bottom, because it's like a digital conversation. And you can upload documents and you can send links and all sorts of other bits and pieces. But technology like that can really help organisations because that's geared around efficiency, time efficiency. And with everybody being so time poor, if you can come up with solutions like that that really help organisations, you will get their ear, because those are the sorts of things that cause them pain. But there's such a lot of digital noise out there, it's a problem. The other thing that's quite interesting from a psychological point of view is that people move away from pain more easily than they'll move towards an improvement. And the reason I've put that up there is because if you're in a position where you want to run a project and you want to implement a system or a solution, and it's to move that organisation forward, sometimes they won't go for it, and it doesn't make sense to us, does it? Because you'll think, well, I can save you a lot of time, I can save you a lot of money if you put this system in. But they can't visualise that, they can't go beyond where they are, because they can't see that working situation. But if you say to them, if you don't do this, the consequences will be that you could be fined up to 20 million euros or 4% of your annual turnover, as is the case with GDPR. If you put risks to their business to them, they're more likely to listen than to listen to things that are nice to move to. So when you're looking at justifying things, look at the real reason that sits behind the need to put that system in or to run that data management project, whatever it happens to be. Look at the risks, look at the pros, the cons, look at it from a business perspective, not a technical perspective, and you're more likely, in most instances, to get some airtime with senior people. And the real big issue is that business users tend not to have that technology background. They don't understand the technicalities behind how you write a database, how you look after it. And to a certain extent, they shouldn't have to. They should have an overview of it, but we have our job because we've been trained to do it. They're not data experts, they're experts in marketing or in management or in, you know, being a director of an organisation. That's their area of expertise, not IT. But they should have some kind of grounding that sits behind it. So what I thought I'd just do, I did a little bit of investigation as to where there are growth opportunities in IT. And this is from some research. CompTIA does a lot of research across the channel. And this is growth perceptions for this year, for 2017. So you can see which are the growing markets down to which ones are the markets that are sort of shrinking. And I thought, you know, we should keep an eye on, excuse the pun, we should keep an eye on those areas that I've marked there, because they're where you have some real genuine opportunities going forward. So security is a growing market for the tech industries in general, because we've had so many high-profile hacks, haven't we? And the latest one with Equifax, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But that will really get the attention of senior people. If they think their business is at risk, and they've seen in the news themselves that big companies like TalkTalk, Equifax, organisations like that, who you would think would be secure and covered, and actually they're not. So that's an area where you will get airtime. SaaS, software as a service. It's a hugely growing market for the channel. Software as a service is data. It's just stored in the cloud instead of stored on a local server. So it needs those data management protocols and controls to sit around it. So if you come into contact with people who are developing SaaS solutions, or if you're looking within your own organisation to put SaaS applications in, SaaS solutions in, then data management, data governance needs to sit around that just as much as it would do if you put it in on-premise. Mobile technologies have allowed so many people to develop applications on such a wide variety of subject matter. That's all data. So whether it's, you know, things like Receipt Bank, where you can keep copies of your expenses and you can upload those onto different systems, whatever it happens to be, that's data. That needs to integrate with some other core system within an organisation. How's that integration going to work? How do you know that the information that's put in on that application gets through to its destination in the right format, at the right time, that it's seen by the right people, that somebody hasn't just gone off and bought a little app of their own accord? IoT, have any of you come across any Internet of Things projects? Excellent. And what are they in, if I might ask?
I was recently involved with one in healthcare, around building healthcare around IoT devices.
Okay, excellent. I bet that's really interesting. And you?
Yeah, I mean, these are just some test proof of concepts in different technology areas.
Yeah.
Just all small scale tests. Can we get widget A talking to widget B?
Yes.
There's all small stuff, but it's a start.
Healthcare particularly is really interesting with IoT. Have you heard of the Michigan Micronode? It's been developed by researchers at Michigan Institute of IT. And it is a processor that is 1 cubic millimetre. It has the ability to transmit within a 3 metre radius. So it will take an input, it will process it, and it will give an output within a 3 metre radius. And it's power neutral. So it's powered by ambient light. Now, in the healthcare world, you know, there's a lot of talk about having technology that you can swallow that will go and it will find where the source of a problem is, or it'll, you know, it'll take pictures or whatever and transmit the responses back. That technology is already here. I mean, that is a fantastic opportunity in healthcare, isn't it? But then, again, in IoT, on the other side of it, there are security issues. And you look at people, and I think it's already happened in America, where they've had pacemakers fitted. It's an IoT device. They've already proven that you can interrupt and stop somebody's heart where they've got a pacemaker. You can kill them. So that's a real risk, a real concern that sits around IoT devices. But there's massive opportunity, huge opportunity out there for that. It's going to be worth billions. But I've got a slide on that later as well. And then the other one that I think is really interesting is integration services, because not enough people consider the need to integrate their systems 100%. And you know, when I started out back in 1984, systems just didn't integrate. They were written on proprietary operating systems with proprietary databases. They were not designed to talk to each other. These days it's getting better. We have APIs, open APIs, which allow systems to integrate, but it's still not there, is it? Lots of systems, it's not that jigsaw puzzle matching that says if I've got this system that looks after my prospects and I've got this system that looks after my customers, that they link properly. There might be some tentative links that sit between the two that pass the data, but they're not that intelligent yet. So there's a big opportunity that sits around integrating different services, different solutions to make it seamless, really properly seamless from an end user perspective. That's where we can have a big benefit, I think, when it comes to technology, because we know how to do it. Just taking a look at IT occupations. So you can see there, sort of right slap bang in the middle, is the business analysts, the architects, the systems designers. So there is growth in our area of the IT industry. It's not something that's dying off, it is something that is there that's showing consistent levels of growth. So we know that we've got opportunities in the market, we just need to make sure that we're delivering value back to our customer. I also looked at some of the jobs of the future, because I think this is really interesting when you see what the tech industry just runs away with sometimes. And I always find it, you know, the bell curve about early adopters and mainstream and late adopters. I always find it interesting that, you know, we look very much forward as a tech industry at what's coming next. But we don't always. I had a talk today on blockchain, and that's really interesting, but it seems such a long way away from where we actually are. It's untrue. But some of these are going to become job titles of the future. So things like AI developers. Education is very much going to look at going down that artificial intelligence, augmented reality route as a way of changing how education is delivered. I went to the skills show last year at the NEC, and we had robots on the stand. And the robots are being used to work with autistic children. Because typically, autistic children, they want repetition. They want the same thing repeated over and over and over again, because that's what gives them a lot of comfort. It's very hard for a human sometimes to do that because we get bored. We want differences, we want something that's engaging. So they're using robots to help calm autistic children down and help educate them by giving repetition in the way that they educate. So we're already seeing technology coming into that education sphere. That is only going to get bigger. There's another company that I work with locally, and they produce augmented reality solutions. So what they do is they have things like key rings. So when you're at college and you go in for your first week, they'll give you a key ring. And on that key ring is a code. So you can use your smartphone with your key ring, and up will pop things like a map of the campus so that you can find your way around, help in terms of who to go and speak to if you need support, and also learning materials. Because one of the biggest problems with education is that course curriculums alter, the content alters because it needs to be constantly developed. You spend a lot of money in producing books to give to students that are very often quickly out of date. You put it into augmented reality, and you can have something that pops up on your screen in front of you that shows you what your course material is for the next week, for the next term. They can keep that centrally updated far more easily than having to produce printed material, give it out, and then produce new material with different revisions on it. So technology is really starting to change the way that some of these professions operate. And that's quite right, that's what it's there to do. It's there to make our lives easier. It's there to make sure that with our next generations, they're properly equipped to run efficient, effective organisations. So those are just some of the job titles that we might see in the future. Blockchain engineer, I think, is quite an interesting one. So, going back to the original question of data management, that it should be central to every successful business, why isn't it? I think perhaps because people just don't understand what it is and why it's important. We do, but the business doesn't always. If it does understand it and it still doesn't take it seriously, that's a whole different issue. So how do you get heard? Looking at some of the big trends that are happening, so we've got GDPR compliance, we've got analytics as a topic, we've got big data, we've got the Equifax breach, we've got blockchain, we've got IoT. So some of these are terms that the technology industry has invented, and some of them are issues that sit around what we do. GDPR, I know you're probably very up to speed with GDPR. How many of the organisations that you work for are GDPR compliant? No. I don't know one either. And people are talking round and round and round the issues, and you've got people who are saying, well, I'm an expert in GDPR, but until it becomes law, and until there's some case law that says this is how the ICO are going to deal with it, this is how the European Union are going to deal with it, we don't really know, do we, what's going to happen. But GDPR is about data governance. It's about how we manage, how we audit, how we create, who has access to all that data. So a lot of the problems that we see in data management actually get fixed by GDPR if we can use them in the right way. Because it gives control back to making sure that there is some sense behind who has access to what systems. That we've got some control over who is allowed into the finance function, who can get into that folder that sits on the server that's got people's HR details. It makes it a priority for the business to look at, because it's the business that's going to get fined, not the IT department. So I think GDPR is going to be a real big opportunity to introduce some very good data management controls, because it's not just about the technology, it's about building the policies, the procedures, the education of end users for all those things that we keep telling them about. Now, my husband's an insurance broker, so they're governed by the FCA, and the FCA say that you must not have client files that anybody could come into the office and see. So you try and get a room full of insurance people to put all their files away at the end of the day. It's impossible, because they don't see the risk. So we use SaaS software in that business. A lot of the files obviously therefore are electronic, they're not manual, but there are still sometimes bits of paper to do with clients that sit on those desks. As a small business, they don't see the risk, because everybody deals with those cases, everybody knows who those customers are. They're unlikely to be breached. We've got nothing of massive value that somebody's going to break into and steal. So they think, well, okay, we'll just leave that out. So now, my tack is, you're not. It's going away. We will have a clean desk policy. You will not leave your screens on. You'll make sure that you change your passwords regularly. So some of the things we've managed to systemise. So we force password changes on a very regular basis, which they hate, but they have to do it. And it's things like that that, there's a trade-off between users wanting ease of usability and not having to do anything, and us saying, well, you've got to have some control over what you do. And I've seen, again, situations, bring your own device is one of them, where big organisations have said, no, you're not. You can't have your device at work. You can't put a USB device into your laptop and take data home. They will always find a way around it. And the problem is, they have a business need to do what they do. So us saying, don't do it, actually doesn't cut it. Because all we're doing is making them find another way around it. So we have to work with them to find the right solution and come together to give them what they need, but to give us what we need, which is the control, management, governance, audit facility of that data. So GDPR, I think, is a very, very pertinent topic for anybody who's looking at data management issues. And the ultimate, and it's unlikely to hit that €20 million bracket, because if you're working towards GDPR, then the ICO will take a more lenient view if you do get a data breach. But you know, we've got mandatory reporting of data breaches within 72 hours. So that's not long. And I saw a stat the other day that said 1 in 131 emails is malicious. That when you have a ransomware attack, the hackers will often sit on your network for somewhere around 146 days before they do anything. So it's more a matter of when you're going to get breached rather than if you're going to get breached. And it's having the controls in place that minimise that risk to your business from that happening. And that's education, is understanding all those data systems that people use and why they use them and where they use them. I mean, on my phone, I only have one mobile phone. I don't have a private one and a work one, I just have one phone, because I have a very small handbag and it's too heavy. But on my phone, therefore, I've got personal stuff and I've got work stuff. So if I'm like that, lots of other people are also like that. But will they understand why they need to have passcode or, you know, fingerprint on there to be able to access it? Will they understand about making sure that they don't leave that device where somebody else can pick it up? Chances are not, because we don't think like criminals. That's why it's easier for hackers to hack. We think like innocent people because we are. We're not looking to commit crime. We're just looking to get on with our job and live our life in the most efficient way possible with the technology that we've got. But GDPR, I think, is one that will be very good for us to be able to bring some control back under for data management. So analytics and big data, I mean, they're really common terms that are in use these days. And you look at things, gamification, people talk about gamification, they talk about digital engagement, about performance enhancing data. It means nothing to a business person. To us, it sounds fun, because they're all new ways of analysing and working with data. But to a business person, what does that mean? Does it mean that they can do their job more quickly? Does it take the headache out of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis? It might well do, but not if you call it those things. One of our keynotes today was a lady who works at IBM, and she's written a book on digital transformation and why you shouldn't call it digital transformation, because people don't understand it. There's no relationship in their mind between the words and the pain that they have doing their job. So the more we can understand people's jobs and their departments and the data that they need to use and how that needs to flow through their department, the more we do that, the less we'll need to use these terms. They might sit in our world, in our jargon, but we shouldn't be talking to the business in those terms because they just don't get it. Big data, what's big data? It's the ability to analyse a lot of data coming from a lot of different sources. What it will do is it will give that business the ability to really hone in on where they make money, where they don't make money, what lines they should be looking to increase sales on, where they could make savings on their supplier side. It gives them insights that help them to make key business decisions. But you just call it big data and it means nothing. It's too vague for business people to actually understand and do something with. So taking that jargon out of it will make a massive difference to the way that people perceive you. How many of you, do any of you go networking? Do you go to networking meetings, things like that? So some do, some don't. You know, when you go networking, one of the things they always tell you is to listen to somebody else first. Listen to what they have to say, learn about what they're doing, and then you might be able to key your message about what you do into them, and they'll listen to you. And the same actually should be in place for business people. So in our companies, whoever we deal with, we have internal customers as well as external customers. We need to talk to and listen to those internal customers most often because they're the ones that influence budgets and buying of technology solutions. So if we listen to them and we understand their pain and we understand their wording and their terminology and we use that, they're much more likely to be on our side when we want them to invest in a technology project. And they're much more likely to listen if we go to them and say, look, we've got a problem in that your people aren't putting the data into these systems properly, they're not managing it, we can't audit it. They're much more likely to listen if you can put it in terms of the damage that it does their department and them in not being able to get the information out that they want. So, Equifax, it was so much more than just a hack. And I saw again a couple of days ago that apparently it's one guy's responsibility, all of this problem, because he didn't put a patch in place when he should have done. And if he'd have done that, none of this would have happened. That to me is a bit scapegoatish. Because the whole system, you look at the company, you look at the lack of control, the lack of governance, the lack of focus on technology, the fact that they got this on an open platform, that if people knew the right way to get into it, they could get into it. It should never have been allowed to happen. It's not one person's fault at all. It's a failure throughout the whole organisation. And it's also a failure in that they clearly didn't understand the technology that they'd got. They didn't have any understanding of risk because they hadn't assessed the risk that they were at from a technology point of view or with their data. And they didn't have a strategy for managing data, technology, platforms. And you can see it in some big companies. Again, if I go back to the insurance industry, you look at the way that some of the insurers work, they have still got legacy systems. So where one insurer has swallowed up another insurer, has been swallowed by another one, quite often they've still got those systems that were in place in those individual companies in operation. Their ability to produce management information, management reporting is severely limited because they can't get at the data because it's on legacy systems. And they will have invested very heavily, and a lot of big corporates do, they will invest very heavily at a single point in time in a new solution with the hardware, with the network infrastructure, with the software that goes with it, and they will expect it to have a lifespan. So with capital expenditure, I know certainly from my experience, the financial officer always used to say, if you want money to be spent, we're going to amortise all the costs over the next 5 years. So that project, that solution has to last 5 years. How many businesses do you know that stand still 5 years? They just don't, do they? Businesses evolve, they change. They have different requirements. Their customers change, their suppliers change, the economy changes. Having that view that says, we've invested in this system, therefore it must last this length of time, and we're not going to put any more money into it, that's a lot of what's caused things like the Equifax hack. They haven't kept up to date. They have not invested year on year on year in new technology. We can't afford to do it. Technology moves too fast. If an organisation doesn't have an ongoing strategy for investment in technology, they are going to be left behind. They are going to be in a position where they're open to hack. You look at the NHS, a lot of their equipment was so old, still running XP and Vista. So, that's crazy, isn't it? That's absolutely ludicrous. But they get to the point where they say, we can't afford to buy new equipment. But the only reason is they've never put any money aside to be able to afford to do it. A big organisation like that cannot afford to have a piddly little technology budget. No organisation can afford to have a small technology budget. They have to understand it's part of the growth of the whole business. It's like having a building. If you don't have an office, then you can't house your staff. And I know you can make the case for people working at home, but if you don't have those foundational costs, those overhead costs, IT is part of that. You can't run a business without technology. And you can't run a business on technology that is 2 years out of date, never mind 5, 6, 7 years out of date, because at some point you open your business up to risk. And that really is what business people, directors, senior managers, that's what they've got to wrap their head around. is that there is a need to constantly invest. You cannot put that to one side. Now, blockchain. Has anybody been involved in any blockchain testing or projects? Do you know much about it? I know a little bit more about it than I did this morning. We had this very clever lady come and talk to us about blockchain. It went like that. But, you know, blockchain has been in the news a lot recently, particularly around bitcoins. But blockchain technology, if you take it away, is nothing more than a different way of managing data. You know, it's having distributed data. So instead of holding it in one place, you've got bits of it that are held in different places that are linked together like a chain. So you get the protection because it's not one data that's held in one place and you can link them all together. But when this will actually hit in terms of mainstream technology that's going to affect us, I think that is an entirely different question. But they're already looking at it, obviously from a financial services perspective. So for exchanging money through clearing houses, it's been looked at that level. But even if the technology exists to be able to do that financial cash movement, people are going to get in the way of that, aren't they? Because it's a massive threat to clearing houses, because it will eradicate the need to have them. So when you're looking at technology that supersedes people, people put a roadblock in its way, and they will try and stop it from actually happening. But ultimately, technology will have its way, because it always does. And it's forward movement. But when is an entirely different matter. There was a case that she put up on screen as well that sat around claims on insurance. So if you are on a flight and your flight is delayed, if it goes past, I think she said 2 hours, then the system that's been developed using blockchain technology will allow you to buy the policy. It will automatically recognise if your flight is late. If it's gone over that 2-hour limit, it will automatically make the claim and pay you. So things like that are really interesting developments in the usage of technology, and that all sits around using blockchain as a basis for running those databases, running those processes. So we're going to see it a lot in things like that. But when is a different matter? For you involved in data management, again, there's a massive opportunity to see whether or not any of the companies you work for are interested in looking at blockchain. It's been used in shipping in Sweden to make sure that all of the consignments are in the correct places and get passed properly. So there are growing opportunities that sit around that technology. It's still in its infancy, but you may well find that there's opportunities that sit around it. IoT, the Internet of Things. We spoke a little bit about this earlier on. That'll teach me to do a print screen with that, won't it? It's got chart area stuck right in the middle there. Apologies, I didn't spot that one. IoT is all about trying to use technology to really give us a better customer experience, to help take some of the resource and the time out of running projects. One example that I've seen is with transport. So you look at the rail system that we have in this country, and we have got hundreds of miles of rail track. One of the biggest causes of trains being late or being delayed or being cancelled is degradation of those tracks. And what happens is the track fails, so they stop the trains, they send a team of people out there to fix it. But it's all reactive, it's all when that train track is degraded to the point at which we can't run a train over it. So with IoT, you can put sensors on the tracks, and the sensors are set to monitor the stresses that that track is under. So it can then have the tolerances built into the sensors that say, you know, if it goes past this, it's a risk to the track. That then sends the signal back to the console, and people can be more proactive in going out and fixing the piece of rail track before it fails, rather than having to do it after it's failed. So you give a better customer experience because you're keeping those trains running more consistently, more of the time. So it's way better for that organisation to do that, for the rail network to do that. Another one of my clients, they sell fans. So they import fans. Some of them are big fans, big industrial ones. Some of them are tiny fans that sit inside computer equipment. You won't think that's anything to do with IoT. But what they've come up with is fans that sit in fridges. So you look at a newsagent where they've got a drinks cabinet, a chiller cabinet. That's using a fan to keep the temperature down so that when we go in on a hot day, we can buy a nice cold drink that cools us down. The trouble is that with a standard fridge, it's either on or it's off. So they tend to keep them on 24 hours a day because it takes too long to bring the fridge down to temperature to give us a cold drink. That's a huge waste of electricity. So what my clients come up with is a solution where you can monitor and control when that fan comes on and when it goes off. So you can set the time that says fan is to come on at 6 o'clock in the morning so that by 8 o'clock it's cold. And that it goes off at 6 o'clock at night because nobody's in the shop, it's shut. And if it goes over this temperature or under this temperature, ring an alarm to tell us there's something wrong with it. And it can report that back on a little app. You look at the supermarkets where you've got all those big open fridges. So it's freezing, isn't it, when you walk down those aisles. When there's a lot of people in the shop, you need to have those fans working more because more people mean there's more heat, so they need to work more to bring the temperature down. When the shop's shut or when it's quiet, you don't need those fans to be on to that same extent. So same rules apply. You can have sensors that will sense the ambient temperature, that will make sure that the fridge is working as effectively and as efficiently as possible. They can save thousands of pounds in electricity by having simple solutions like that. But the really interesting thing for me was that whilst that's an IoT solution and it's really clever, and they've got some very big names who are interested in it, I asked them what they were doing about security. And he looked at me like I was on Mars, because he hadn't even thought about it. And the reason he'd not thought about it was because he works for a company that essentially buy and sell fans. They're not a technology company. But it's so easy to code things these days, to talk to people about developing apps that sit outside of our qualified environment where we've spent years learning about pros and cons, about the need for security and protocols, and they haven't. You look at John Deere. John Deere are an agricultural manufacturing company. They're a tech company now. They're called farm tech. They're part of the farm tech world because their tractors are satellite controlled. But their background is not in tech, it's in farm machinery. So they're using tech in a really innovative way, but do they really know what the risks are of using it? I mean, what would happen if somebody hacked a tractor? They're massive machines, aren't they? They're really heavy. They could cause a lot of damage. So, we see people in vans that come around and drive up pavements and try and kill people that way. You could quite easily do a similar sort of thing in a rural environment using a tractor. It's just as heavy. There's no people involved in it. So the need to keep devices like that secure is really high, but the understanding of the risk is really low. So IoT is a real opportunity for us, but it's a massive risk for organisations that don't understand what sits behind it. And I think by 2026, it's predicted, I think Gartner predicted this, that there will be 50.1 billion IoT devices by 2026. So it's a massive, massive number. Drones are another area, aren't they? And what we do with those. And in America, they have actually got drones that have got machine guns on them. So Terminator, here we come. Skynet. So some of the things that you can do sit around education of your customer, whether that's an internal customer or whether that's an external customer. They are the consumers of what we produce as a technology person. What they're interested in is what's in it for me. Why should they go for a project? Why should they invest in data? Why should they have somebody who's formally qualified and could be quite expensive perform a data management function? So why would they want to do that? So look at the risk. What's the benefit to them in doing it? Not what's the benefit to you, what's the benefit to them in running that data management project? What is it that's their pain that they're interested in solving? If you solve their pain, they're your best friend. What's the loss to them of not doing the data management project that you're involved in or that you're proposing? So, is it really worth the money? And that's in their terms, not in your terms. And some of these are really quite hard to put together when you're very invested in the project that you're trying to get clearance on running. Because you see the need for it, and it's really frustrating when they just don't. And the best way to do it is sit yourself in their shoes, walk in their shoes, see what their problems are, look at it really from their perspective, not your perspective. Understand them inside out. You'll have a much, much better chance of getting them to understand and take data management seriously as they ought to. So what is their pain? If they haven't got pain, they're unlikely to put a solution in. There's a subset of people who are very proactive, who will always go for new technology solutions, and they're the innovators. But as a proportion of the overall population, they're really low. There's not many people who are keen on looking at a risky project, one that isn't proven. So you've got to understand the pain points in the majority of people to get them to buy into what you do. So from their perspective, make sure that they see you as a trusted support to them. You're their trusted business advisor internally. You're the person that they come to when they've got a problem. You need to get them into that frame of mind that you can solve their problems. You're not a panacea, because nobody is, but there are genuinely things that you can do that make their life easier. And if you can start doing those and talking to them in their business terms and looking out for them and thinking proactively of what they would need to do in the future, if you can come up with solutions like that, they will start coming to you and they will start listening to what you have to say. So just in summary, I think clarity is absolutely key to being able to cut through the noise of all the other people that are clamouring at decision makers' doors for money and for time and for resource. So the more clearly you can explain what it is you want to do to make your data management project successful, the more clearly you can do that, the better it is. Understanding how to educate people around risk and risk mitigation is vital, and it's a really good way of getting people's attention, because a lot of people are very risk averse. They don't want risk in their business. You know, when I do some of the training at vendors and distributors, it's around cyber security. And they'll always say to me, you know, well, people won't buy our products because they, you know, it's expensive to buy some of the cyber security products and to have our consultancy to do it. So why should they do it? So, you know, you turn that on its head from a business point of view. Okay, let's have a look. What's the risk of being hacked? Because the risk of being hacked is that you might lose your data, you might lose it completely, you might lose it for a period of time. How long could you actually run your company without data, where you can't process a customer's order, where you can't fulfil it and you can't get the money in from them, where you can't pay your suppliers so they put you on stock? How long as a business can you actually survive if that were the case? What happens to your reputation? Will you lose customers? TalkTalk did, didn't they? They lost an awful lot of customers as a result of it. And not only that, they had to offer incentives to keep the customers that they kept. So they were selling product at a vastly reduced rate to a smaller number of customers. And they also have to put in place controls that say that all of those customers have free access to credit checking software to see whether or not their bank accounts have had money taken out of them. Forever. So the cost is huge associated with things like that. Then there's the remediation cost. how much is it actually going to take you to put right what went wrong in the first place? So if it was your website that was hacked, that website needs to be investigated, it needs to be brought back up online, it will need to be recoded to make sure it's secure, rehosted on a secure server, whatever it happens to be, there's a remediation cost. If you start explaining those risks and you get people to put a pound note price cost against them, those costs work out really big. Those costs will far outweigh the investment that you're asking for to run your data management project. But a lot of it, again, is around understanding those pain points. If you can put across to a business person what's causing them pain and how you can solve that pain, that will definitely get you airtime. So you have to be able to demonstrate how you add value. Sometimes it's about having a balanced approach. So tell them what the consequences are of the decisions that they make. So if they make the decision to go forward with a project, what are the pros and cons of it? If they make a decision to do nothing, what are the pros and cons of that? Take yourself out of it, take the personal element out of it, and make it very clear cut. What would happen if we do it? What happens if we don't do it? And see if they can make the decision then for themselves as to whether or not they want to take that risk in their business of not running that project. So it's understanding the business and developing trust with them, real trust with them. I hope you found that useful. If anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to take them.
Yep, thank you, Tracy. So, questions for Tracy? Okay, well,
This is the going home time.
I'll start with one. So, in terms of GDPR,
Yeah.
that's obviously a wake-up call which hopefully should start to get people treating data more seriously. Do you think that's going to lift the bar and lift the awareness permanently, or are people going to risk of drifting back again to what they've always done?
No, I think it will change it permanently. Because if the bar lowers again, you're going to see more people who are going to be fined through GDPR, so they're going to have to raise that bar again. I think to make it successful, it has to be permanent, because it needs to sit around policies and procedures and audits, and because you've got all these constant checks, like, you know, the consent for dealing with data, and you have to reconsent every so often, I think that will keep it quite high. I hope so anyway. It needs to.
Yeah.
Thanks for the talk, Tracy. Really interesting. I had a question really about the level of awareness, because that's really what it's all about at board level. Have you seen the level of awareness increasing over the last few years because of things like the regulations or the talks of hacks and big data being advertised on TV?
No.
You're not.
No, I haven't in real terms to date. I think when we get into GDPR coming in, then it's going to really change. Because I think there are still a lot of people who are putting their heads in the sand, who think it's not going to happen, or we're coming out of the European Union, therefore it doesn't apply to us. And they're going to see if they can get away with not doing anything until one of them gets fined.
But not even looking at the opportunities that, so-called big data opportunities or data analytics opportunities, you're not seeing an increased awareness of those kind of things?
In terms of analytics and big data, yes, there's more uptake on that. In terms of GDPR, I think there's not yet. There's still a lot of lack of understanding. In the tech industries, there's a lack of understanding of what GDPR means.
Well, it's not very well publicised, I don't think, is it? In general?
No, it isn't. And there's so much misinformation and so many people saying, it's this, when actually it isn't. And, that's now prompted the ICO to issue guidelines, hasn't it, to demystify, debunk some of the rubbish that people have been saying about it. But I think GDPR will have an impact when it comes in, but I don't think we'll have... I think there'll be a start of an opportunity for managed service providers to do more in the area leading up to it, but it's going to be after it comes in when the ICO go out and start finding people. Because they've already started to man up, haven't they, the ICO? They've got their resources are in the hundreds now. So they are getting people ready, getting them trained to go out and do audits. They're going to have to stand on their own 2 feet, so they're going to need to make money somehow, and that way they make money is by finding people.
think the key with GDPR as well is actually making people realise that if you actually manage your data under those principles, it has significant benefits to a business.
Yes.
And that is the hardest thing that I've had to get across to my organisation.
Yeah.
Because you communicate with people in a way that they want you to. You use the data in a way that they're happy for you to do so. You're open, you're honest, it builds trust.
Yes.
And that is one of the key things
It is.
that where you can try and spin it and actually get a lot of buy-in, because you say to people, why are you sending out 20,000 emails and only 1,000 people are opening them? Or we can't possibly reduce our mailing list, but why?
Yes.
No one's engaging with it. And
Yes.
if you engage with people in the way that they want to, you're going to build.
Well, you build a better quality database for a start-up, don't you? And a more engaged prospect client base as a result of it. Yeah, that is very true. Very true.
And you trust your data more.
Yeah. Yes, because I mean that is one of the big issues in organisations, isn't it? People don't trust data. That's why they sit and fiddle with little Excel spreadsheets and databases, is because they have to do their own analysis to prove that the main database is right or wrong. And then they get a different result because they don't always get their calculations right.
One thing I wonder, the challenge of outsourcing in the context of data management services, I wonder if you have any comments on whether that makes outsourcing more difficult.
Well, to outsource data management?
No, what I mean is if you're outsourcing IT services as an organisation,
yes,
and you haven't thought through the implications of data management as part of the contractual arrangements, what kind of issues, I mean, how bad is it to outsource if you haven't really thought through data management, I suppose is what I'm saying.
I think it's very hit and miss. I think it's a big risk because it's down to the company that you outsource to as to how good they are at being able to explain, understand what they're going to deliver for you as their customer.
But ultimately, the company may be wonderful, but if you haven't paid for it, if it's not in the contract, they may just say, well, you should have bought it from us, but you haven't paid for it.
I think some of the risks there depend on the nature of the business. So if you are managing assets, physical infrastructure, that might last for tens, hundreds of years. And if you outsource it and they do something wrong with the data, or they don't gather the data you expect, then you can't recover that data. And so it's actually quite a different risk, a different pain point to maybe retail, where it might be the sales haven't been recorded, but you'll recover in the next quarter. Once you've lost some of that data about, let's say, buried cables and buried pipes, you can't go back and just resurvey it because it's buried.
Yeah, but it's about understanding who owns that data as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
And as an organisation, if it's your data, you own it. So you need to be responsible for it, and you need to know where it is, but GDPR is going to bring that in. Because one of the things there is you have to keep a register of all your data. So where is it, who has access to it, why do you have it?
Yeah, this is a big problem because, I'm sure we all know, it's to do with the processor as well as the owner of the data. And if you're offering services where you're hosting your client's data, actually, you probably, in many cases, don't know what they're putting on it.
Yeah.
And so suddenly we've got an obligation, and the company I've was recently retired from is actually using profiling software to look at the data to see if anything is indicating that there's personally identifiable data within that, so that they can go back to the client and say, is this the case? What do you want to do about it under GDPR?
Yes, but specifically with regard to hosting of data, the ICO recommendations are that if you host data and there's a breach, you as the hosting company do not report it to the authority, you report it to the people you're hosting on their behalf of. It's their responsibility to report it to the authority. So hosting companies are not going to have to be in control of absolutely everything they're hosting because it's not their data. It belongs to another organisation. It's trying to make sure that source is right.
Isn't that right? They are actually responsible for the breach as opposed to the control. I think the processor in this case would take the responsibility. They do have to report it to controllers.
No, they don't. Well, they have to.
But
the hosting
where does the responsibility lie in this case?
The hosting company is responsible for reporting a breach back to the company that they're hosting it for. Then they have to report it to the authority. Right. Yes.
But if, say, it wasn't reported within 72 hours, then it's not the hosting company, than it's the...
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Because it's that company's data. It's not the hosting company's data. They don't own it.
Yeah.
They're just looking after it.
However, if there was a breach and the hosting company was aware of something happened, they've gone through the correct process of reporting it to the company that they're hosting that data for,
Yes.
and then that company doesn't act upon that and doesn't report within 72 hours, is there then a duty on the host to report that information, to report that to the...
That I don't know.
We definitely need another GDPR event.
It sounds
Yes.
like it, yeah.
Yes. There are still so many questions.
It's all, you have to make sure your contracts between, so the person who owns the data is the controller, the processor, the people that are doing it on their behalf. You have to make sure that those contracts are absolutely tight, because it depends on how that breach occurs. If you've got a company that's not got sufficient security measures in, and you're using them and you haven't carried out your due diligence, you will actually be liable. If you've done your due diligence, they
Yeah.
said they'll do X, Y and Z,